This is Democracy Now! On the morning after, on the day after the Super Tuesday primaries, where both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump swept many of the states that they were competing in, each of them getting 7 states. Bernie Sanders winning in 4 states, Ted Cruz winning in 3 states, and Marco Rubio picking up his first state, Minnesota. Our guests are James Peterson at Lehigh University and Donna Murch from Rutgers University. James Peterson, your overall reaction to what took place on Super Tuesday?
Well, first, there's extreme irony on the Republican side to hear establishment Republicans try to push Donald Trump on his KKK maneuvering around those comments and calling for him to reject those kinds of groups when the party on the whole, over the last, 6 or 7 presidential elections, has deployed what we refer to as the Southern strategy, which is a strategy that usually uses like dog whistles and different kinds of underhanded ways of forcing their base to sort of think more racially in terms of the American body politic. And so when you saw Trump maneuvering around that question just days before you have Super Tuesday, which features Georgia, Texas, these huge southern states, he was actually playing into the establishment Republican playbook. He just does it more explicitly, and he does it in a way that I think the base of the Republican Party, particularly in the South, can identify with as not being politically correct. And so his strategy was realized on Super Tuesday, but it's interesting to see Republicans reject something that they've embraced in a more subversive way for a long time in Republican politics. Obviously, Hillary Clinton is also a big winner coming out of last night. Professor Murch is absolutely right, though, that we have to kind of break down some of the numbers to think about what's been successful on the Sanders side of the Democratic presidential race at this point in time. There are some interesting maneuvers that he's made with millennials, with the black left and the intellectual class. But at the end of the day, the Clintons have built a machine in this country, particularly in the South, it's not just patronage. You know, they've gotten a lot of black officials elected, but they also have an extensive ground game in many of these large states, a lot of the Super Tuesday states, that's been in place for almost a couple of decades now. And so Hillary Clinton is certainly a beneficiary of the long sort of history of Clintons in American politics. I think the Sanders campaign and the surrogates for Sanders have to be careful about how they chastise black folks and other folks who don't come over to their cause, because at the end of the day, some of the commentary has been condescending, coming from the black left, directed at black folks who support Hillary Clinton. And so you have these sort of internecine squabbles in and around people being smart about politics, who we should be voting for, what are the particular issues for the Democratic Party and the left going into the future. I loved Juan's piece about the Latino millennials, because that is going to more and more become an essential piece of this. I hope, though, that for all the voting folks on the left in the Democratic Party, I hope it becomes less about rejecting Donald Trump and more about what the progressive values of the Democratic Party needs to be going into the 21st century.
And James Peterson, I want to ask you about a line of argument that Donald Trump is increasingly pressing in his press conferences and his availabilities, and that is about the energy level of the voters in the Republican primaries versus the Democratic primaries. We're seeing record numbers of people voting in the Republican primaries, and we're seeing pretty much so far a diminished turnout in the Democratic primaries, nothing like what occurred when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were contesting the nomination in 2008. Do you have some concern or your perspective on this argument that the Republican base is much more energized at this point?
Well, it's a pendulum swing, Juan. And here's the thing. This is less about like establishment versus outsider politics on the right, and much more about the ways in which Donald Trump, because of his media presence, because of the simplicity of his message, and because of his rejection of what folks think of as being politically correct, he has tapped into the broad swath of Americans who are rejecting the first black presidency. And I know for a lot of folks, it's hard for them to think about this all being about race, and maybe it's not simply about race, but there are a lot of Americans who honestly feel as if Barack Obama and the current demographic shift, some of of the shifts that you talked about in your piece, Juan, are in some ways taking the country away from them. There are folks who feel as if this is the nativist impulse on the right, that America needs to go back to some point in time where white folks were dominant and predominant. So the demographic shifts, 2 terms of the first black presidency, has created a groundswell of folks on the right who are rejecting the future of America, essentially the demographic future of America. Donald Trump is tapping into that. That is a very real base of the Republican Party, and it does galvanize and excite folks who have checked out of a system that they think has been taken away from them via these different demographic shifts and the changing sort of racial makeup of the United States. And so it's more that, especially on Super Tuesday with all those southern states, that Donald Trump is tapping into. On the left, or in the Democratic Party, the left is depressed, partially because of disappointments from the Obama administration, partially because of the sort of 2 decades drift towards the center or towards the right that the Democratic Party has embraced. And so this is why when you play the clips from the Clinton rally versus the Sanders rally, you hear that enthusiasm and that energy in the Sanders rally. You don't hear it at the same level in the Clinton rallies. And part of that is because Sanders has this national ad out right now that's a very simple breakdown of how money in the political process in America is destroying the political process. It is very compelling, very convincing, and folks on the left understand that, especially those of us who are a little bit older who've been experiencing this drift towards the right of the Democratic Party. And so Sanders is definitely tapping into that energy, but the left and the Democratic Party are depressed because of that move towards the right and because of some disappointments in the Obama administration. That great hope that Obama cultivated at the top of his candidacy has diminished, unfortunately, over the last 2 terms, based upon different policy things. And we could talk for hours about the different the minutia of the policies of the Obama administration and how that has disappointed the left. But that's essentially why you're seeing a depressed turnout on the left and a sort of enhanced turnout on the right.
Well,
for Donald
James
Trump.
Peterson.